I don't remember being cheery.
People say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing every day.
Christopher Robin, all grown up, is having difficulty balancing his work and home life. At this point, he's visited by his childhood friends from the 100-Acre Wood. If you know these characters, you probably have a general expectation for how they behave, and this movie absolutely nails that. They're as pure, naive, and innocent as you remember them. Jim Cummings, one of the greatest voice actors of all time, performs in this movie as Winnie the Pooh and Tigger too. Jim Cummings has played these characters for years, so obviously, he nails it. But oddly enough, apparently they had Chris O'Dowd voicing Tigger in the earlier version of this movie, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me considering that they had already hired Jim Cummings to do Pooh. As it stands, Chris O'Dowd's performance didn't do very well at test screenings, so Jim Cummings was brought back in to do the voice of Tigger. Ultimately, I think most people will agree that that was the right decision. The other 100-Acre Woods characters don't have the people who have done their voices in the past doing their voices in this movie, but unlike Jim Cummings, who has very specific individual kinds of performances for Tigger and Pooh, the other characters mostly get by on personality alone and having voices that more or less fit a certain range. And as I stated before, the personalities of every character are nailed by the actors, so it's not as big a deal. I've been looking forward to this movie for a really long time on concept alone, and I feel like it absolutely delivers. Not just on the purity and naivety of the 100-Acre Wood characters, or the emotional nostalgia that comes with seeing another Winnie the Pooh property coming to life, but on Christopher Robin's journey through the film, and how his interactions with these characters shape that journey. The story of the film doesn't have a lot of great shocks or surprises, but it is well constructed as a story, and it accomplishes what it sets out to do. Something worthy to note about my particular experience with this film is that I promised certain friends of mine I would go see it with them, specifically. However, adult life is tricky sometimes, so for a while our schedules never lined up, and I ended up seeing this movie over a month after its release date. But let me tell you, that extra amount of wait time was absolutely worth it. My score for Christopher Robin is 9 out of 10.
That is good.
Well,
Me, baby.
The Happytime Murders.
In a city heavily prejudiced against puppets, several belonging to the cast of a prolific TV show have been murdered. Private investigator Phil Phillips teams up with his old partner, Connie Edwards, to investigate. This film was advertised as kid-friendly looking puppets in decidedly non-kid-friendly situations, and it definitely delivered on that. I would have to say it reminds me most of Robot Chicken or Drawn Together in terms of using shock humor in combination with our childhood. The puppet work was definitely impressive, which makes sense because Brian Henson's company, Henson Alternative, is one of the production companies behind this film. So you can tell that this is coming from someone who respects the craft of puppetry for entertainment. A blooper reel played during the credits of this movie, and based on that, not only do you get to see a little bit of the puppetry that goes into this movie, but you can just tell this was a pretty fun movie to work on. I laughed a lot while watching this movie, so I definitely had fun with it. A lot of the humor comes from moments, both plain dialogue and gags, that showcase how puppets live and function in ways that are similar and yet also somewhat unique in comparison to humans. That, and the constant smartassing of the main characters, made for some good chuckles. That said, the shock value of puppets doing mature humor does wear off, and by a certain point in the movie it starts to feel like certain gags are going on too long. That's a little unfortunate for a movie that only runs about an hour and a half, because then those jokes just start to feel like they're padding out the runtime to reach feature length, as if the story itself wasn't enough to get them there. Like a lot of movies featuring the Muppets, the Happytime Murders takes a fairly basic story type and spices it up with puppet attitude and humor, this time with vulgarity and lewd content. It was good for a few laughs, and it delivered exactly what it intended to deliver. My score is 6.5 out of 10.
I chose to raise a family. For me, it was a privilege. But for you, you may think it's old-fashioned.
Don't you want Nick to be happy?
I know you're not what Nick needs.
Rachel Chu's boyfriend, Nick Young, brings her to Singapore for his best friend's wedding. On this journey, she learns that the Young family is not only super rich, but clings fiercely to tradition and structure to the point that her first impressions with the family, especially Nick's mother, are made difficult. Crazy Rich is definitely accurate. The parties, the ceremonies, basic living environments. Extra is a good word to describe them. Extraordinary, extravagant, extra everything. This story has some good drama in it. There's culture clashing and something about the difference of wealth, but a lot of it focuses on the expectations that could be set for Rachel if she chose to marry Nick and become a part of their greater family unit. The circumstances in this movie involve moments where the audience needs to have understanding of multiple points of view, even the ones that we're not meant to sympathize with. This is present in both the main storyline and events involving side characters. These circumstances are often very messy. Not everyone can be the good guy, obviously, and it leads the characters to have to find the best way to navigate through these circumstances and move forward. In other words, it's life. That is basically a description of life. Certain plot points are romanticized or dramatized in typical Hollywood style, but this movie has plenty of grounding, realistic moments, a lot of which teach very sound values about how to approach certain particularly complex situations in life. This movie got a lot of media attention because of the modern call for increased diversity in American cinema, but it became successful because of good word of mouth, which I absolutely think it deserves. In a few ways, trope-wise, story-wise, it is similar to other romantic comedies, a genre I don't really seek out that often, but I had fun with this one. Crazy Rich Asians gets a 7.5 out of 10. That concludes this episode of Cold Cases. This is Detective Steve. See you next time.